Professor Zethkar walked into his lecture hall with the confidence of someone who had spent 30 years teaching the brightest minds in the galaxy. His 4 eyes swept across the packed auditorium where students from 12 different worlds sat waiting for his morning xenobiology class. The centaurians with their blue scales gleamed under the artificial lights while the insectoid klaxons clicked their mandibles in greeting. Near the back, a group of crystalline Vorthax students hummed in harmonic frequencies that made the air shimmer slightly. Today was going to be another routine day of educating these young minds about the wonders and mysteries of life throughout the galaxy. At least, that was what Zethkar thought until his graduate student Wilkshla approached his podium with that eager look in her large, black eyes that meant she had another wild theory to propose. "Professor Zethkar," she began in her melodic Centaurian accent, "I have been researching the mythology surrounding a species called humans, and I believe there might be some truth to the stories we have been hearing from the Outer Rim traders." The professor's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his people. He had heard this before from overeager students who let their imagination run wild after listening to too many spacer tales in the campus cantinas every semester. Brought at least one student convinced they had discovered evidence of some legendary species that turned out to be nothing more than folklore mixed with too much Andromedan ale. "Ah yes, humans," Zethkar said, his voice carrying easily through the lecture hall's acoustic enhancement system. "Another favorite topic of yours, I see. Class, this provides us with an excellent example of how mythology can contaminate scientific research if we are not careful to maintain proper academic rigor." He activated the holographic display above his podium and began projecting images of various mythical creatures that had been reported throughout galactic history. A winged serpent from the Draconis sector appeared first, followed by the supposed giant space whales that some claimed lived in the void between galaxies. You see, young minds, their galaxy is full of stories. Traders spend months alone in deep space and their minds begin to play tricks on them. They see things that are not there. They create elaborate tales to make their boring cargo runs seem more exciting. And before we know it, these fantasies become accepted as possible truth by those who should know better. Yixla's scales shifted to a deeper blue, which Zethkar recognized as embarrassment among her people, but she persisted. "But Professor, the descriptions are remarkably consistent across multiple independent sources. These humans are described as bipedal mammals, roughly 2 meters tall, with forward-facing eyes and opposable thumbs. Their supposed homeworld is called Earth, located in what they call the Milky Way galaxy's outer spiral arm. Consistency means nothing when dealing with shared delusions," Zethkar replied dismissively. "Consider the so-called evidence, class. These alleged humans are described as having developed faster than light. Travel in less than a single century. Impossible. Every known species required at least 1,000 years of technological development before achieving interstellar flight." He paused to let this sink in before continuing his methodical destruction of the human myth. Furthermore, these stories claim that humans survived multiple extinction-level events on their homeworld. Asteroid impacts, climate changes, volcanic winters, ice ages. No species could survive such repeated catastrophes and still develop advanced technology. The mathematical probability is essentially 0. A student near the front, a young Altarian with purple fur covering his elongated skull, raised one of his 6 arms. "Professor, what about the reports of human ships in the neutral zones? Several cargo captains have filed official sightings with the Galactic Transit Authority." Zethkar's laugh was a harsh clicking sound. "Have you examined those reports closely? The descriptions of these supposed human vessels are contradictory and impossible. Some describe ships made of primitive metals, others claim to have seen vessels that phase in and out of normal space without using known dimensional technology. These are clearly the products of overworked minds seeing familiar objects in unusual lighting conditions." He walked across the platform, his 8 legs carrying him in the graceful dance-like gait of his species. "Let me share with you the most ridiculous claims about these mythical humans. They are supposed to be simultaneously the most violent species in the galaxy and the most compassionate. They allegedly wage war with terrifying efficiency while also risking their lives to save complete strangers. They are described as both highly logical and completely emotional. These contradictions alone should tell you everything you need to know about the reliability of these stories. The lecture hall filled with the various sounds of agreement from the assembled students. The klaxons buzzed their approval while the Vorthok crystals chimed in harmonic support of their professor's logical analysis. But the most telling piece of evidence against the existence of humans, Zethkar continued, is the complete lack of any verifiable contact. In over 2,000 years of galactic civilization, with trade routes spanning millions of star systems and diplomatic relations with over 300 species, not one human has ever set foot on any civilized world. Not one human artifact has been verified by proper scientific analysis. Not one human transmission has been recorded by our deep space monitoring networks. Yixla looked down at her research pad, her enthusiasm clearly dampened by her professors. Thorough debunking. Zethkar felt a moment of sympathy for the young student, but knew that learning to distinguish between scientific fact and appealing fiction was one of the most important lessons he could teach. This is not to discourage your curiosity, he added in a gentler tone. The desire to discover new life is what drives all xenobiologists. But we must channel that desire through the discipline of the scientific method. We must demand evidence, not just stories. We must require verification, not just consistency. We must insist on facts, not just beliefs. In the back of the lecture hall, 3 figures in simple gray uniforms listened to every word with growing amusement. Captain Jake Morrison glanced at Dr. Lisa Parker and Engineer Danny Rodriguez, and all 3 shared the same thought. They had been observing this university for weeks, learning about how the galactic academic community viewed their species. Professor Zethkar's lectures had been particularly educational, though perhaps not in the way the good professor intended. Tomorrow we will examine the proper methods for investigating reports of unknown species, Zethkar announced as he began shutting down his holographic display. We will look at how to separate legitimate xenobiological discoveries from the myths and legends that cloud our understanding of the galaxy's true diversity. As students began filing out of the lecture hall, chattering about the day's lesson in dozens of different languages and communication methods, Jake Morrison made a quiet note on his observation pad. Tomorrow would indeed be an interesting day for Professor Zethkar's xenobiology class, though the professor had no idea just how interesting it was about to become. The morning after his lecture about human mythology, Professor Zethkar received an urgent message from Chancellor Vexter that changed everything. He was reviewing his notes for the day's advanced xenobiology course when the communication crystal on his desk began pulsing with the blue light that indicated high-priority university business. The Chancellor's image appeared in holographic form, her tentacles writhing with what Zethkar recognized as barely contained excitement. "Professor, I have extraordinary news," Chancellor Vexler announced without her usual formal greeting. "We have been contacted by representatives of a previously unknown species from the Outer Rim territories. 3 individuals have requested to audit your advanced xenobiology course as part of a cultural exchange program. This could be the discovery of our careers." Zethkar felt his academic pulse quicken. A new species meant research opportunities, publication possibilities, and potentially a significant boost to his already impressive reputation. The University of HFY had not been the first to make contact with a new civilization in over 50 years. Such a discovery would put them at the forefront of xenobiological research once again. "What do we know about them?" he asked, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice while maintaining proper academic composure. "Very little," the Chancellor admitted. "They arrived yesterday in a ship that our engineers are still trying to understand. The technology appears functional but uses principles we have not encountered before. They speak Galactic Standard perfectly, which is unusual for a species making first contact. They have requested specifically to observe your classes, claiming they wish to learn about our understanding of biological diversity throughout the galaxy. Have they provided any information about their homeworld or their biology? Zethkar inquired. They have been remarkably evasive about details, Vexter replied. They claim their world is in a region we have not yet explored and that they prefer to let their presence speak for itself. Most curious behavior for a first contact situation, but who are we to question the customs of a new species? After the Chancellor ended the communication, Zethkar spent the rest of the morning preparing for what could be the most important class of his career. He reviewed his standard introduction to galactic biodiversity, making sure his presentation would be impressive enough to demonstrate the sophisticated nature of their civilization while remaining accessible to beings who might have very different ways of processing information. When he entered the lecture hall that afternoon, he immediately noticed the three new figures sitting in the back row. They were humanoid in basic structure, which was not unusual since bipedal forms had evolved independently on dozens of worlds. But something about them seemed different from any species he had encountered before. They sat with a relaxed alertness that suggested both physical capability and mental focus. Their eyes moved constantly, seeming to take in every detail of their surroundings with an intensity that was both professional and somehow protective. The rest of his regular students had already taken their usual seats. Yixla sat in the front row with her research pad ready, still looking slightly embarrassed from yesterday's discussion about human mythology. The Klaxon students clustered together in their preferred spot near the environmental controls where they could adjust the humidity to their comfort. The Crystalline Vorthax students hummed quietly in the back corner, their natural harmonics creating a pleasant background vibration. Welcome to Advanced Xenobiology, Zethkar began, addressing the entire class but focusing particular attention on the three newcomers. Today we have the extraordinary privilege of hosting three representatives from a species new to our galactic community. Would our guests please introduce themselves to the class? The three strangers exchanged glances that seemed to communicate volumes without words. Then the one in the center stood with an easy confidence that reminded Zethkar of predator species, though something about the gesture felt more protective than threatening. He was tall and broad-shouldered with short dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold depths of experience. Thank you, Professor, the newcomer said in perfect galactic standard, though his accent carried undertones that Zethkar could not place. My name is Jake Morrison. These are my colleagues, Dr. Lisa Parker and Danny Rodriguez. We come from a small world called Earth, which orbits a yellow star in what we call the Milky Way galaxy. We are what you might call human. The lecture hall fell completely silent. Even the Vorthix stopped their harmonious humming. Zethkar felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his 8 legs. The word human echoed in his mind, connecting instantly to yesterday's lecture and his confident dismissal of their existence as mere mythology. Dr. Lisa Parker stood next, a woman with auburn hair pulled back in a practical style and intelligent green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. We have been observing galactic civilization for some time, she said calmly. We decided it was time to make formal contact and learn more about how other species understand the universe we all share. Danny Rodriguez remained seated but raised his hand in what Zethkar assumed was a greeting gesture among their people. He was younger than the other two, with dark skin and an easy smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and slightly mischievous. We are particularly interested in your academic approach to studying biological diversity, he added. Our own scientists would be fascinated by your methods and discoveries. Zethkar found himself unable to speak for several long moments. His mind raced through the implications of what was happening. The species he had spent decades dismissing as folklore was sitting in his classroom, speaking to his students and claiming to have been watching galactic civilization from a distance. Every certainty he had built his career upon was crumbling before his eyes. You claim to be human, he finally managed to say, his voice sounding strange even to himself. But surely you understand that humans are considered mythological beings in our academic community. There is no scientific evidence for your existence. Jake Morrison's smile was both understanding and slightly sad. We know exactly what the galactic academic community thinks about humans, Professor. That is part of why we are here. We have been listening to your lectures for several weeks now, and we found your perspectives quite educational, though perhaps not in the way you intended. The revelation that these beings had been observing his classes without his knowledge sent a chill through Zethkar's exoskeleton. How long had they been watching? What else did they know about the university, about galactic civilization, about his own dismissive attitudes toward their species? We do not wish to disrupt your class, Dr. Parker added diplomatically. We are here to learn and to begin building bridges between our peoples. We hope you will allow us to continue attending your lectures. Zethkar looked around his lecture hall at students whose expressions ranged from fascination to confusion to outright disbelief. His comfortable world of academic certainty had just been turned upside down by three beings, whose very existence challenged everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. The weeks following the human's introduction to his class became the most challenging period of Professor Zethkar's academic career. Every day brought new revelations that systematically destroyed the foundation of knowledge he had spent 3 decades building. Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Parker, and Danny Rodriguez attended his lectures with polite attention, taking notes like any other students. But their occasional questions and comments revealed depths of knowledge that should have been impossible for any species to possess. During his lecture on radiation tolerance in carbon-based life forms, Zethkar had been explaining why most species could not survive in environments with high levels of ionizing radiation. He showed holographic models of cellular damage and genetic breakdown that occurred when organic molecules were exposed to dangerous energy levels. According to all established scientific principles, complex life simply could not exist on worlds with significant radiation sources. The mathematical models are quite clear, he told his class while displaying charts showing cellular death rates. No known carbon-based species can survive long-term exposure to radiation levels above 50 units per solar cycle. This is why we find no advanced civilizations on worlds near pulsars or in systems with unstable stars. Dr. Lisa Parker raised her hand with that same calm demeanor she had shown since first introducing herself. Professor, that is very interesting research, but I should mention that my grandmother lived her entire life in a region affected by a nuclear accident on our homeworld. The radiation levels in her area were nearly 200 units per cycle. For decades, yet she lived to be 93 years old and had 6 healthy children. The classroom fell silent once again, as it had been doing regularly since the humans arrived. Zethkar felt his mandibles twitch with nervous energy. Nuclear accidents were theoretical disasters that his models predicted would sterilize entire continents. The idea that anyone could live in such an environment, let alone reproduce successfully, contradicted everything he understood about biological systems. That seems highly unlikely, he managed to respond. Perhaps your measurement units are different from ours. I can provide you with the conversion formulas if you would like to verify the numbers, Lisa offered politely. We have extensive medical records from the affected populations. The human body appears to be remarkably adaptable to environmental stresses that would be fatal to most other species. The next week brought another uncomfortable revelation during his discussion of atmospheric requirements for complex life. Zethkar was explaining why certain gas mixtures were toxic to all known biological systems when Danny Rodriguez casually mentioned growing up on a world with an atmosphere that should have been instantly lethal. Our colonies on Mars required some adaptation, Danny said as if discussing the weather. The atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide with very little oxygen, and the atmospheric pressure is less than 1% of what we evolved with on Earth. But with some basic technology and genetic modifications, humans have been living there for over 2 centuries now. Zethkar stared at the young human engineer with growing dismay. Mars-type worlds were classified as completely uninhabitable in every xenobiology textbook. The atmospheric conditions Danny described would cause immediate respiratory failure in any known species. Yet he spoke of human colonies as if they were commonplace. Genetic modifications, Zethkar repeated slowly. You mean your species has developed advanced genetic engineering capabilities? Oh, yes, Danny replied with that easy smile that was becoming familiar to the professor. We have been modifying ourselves for various environments for quite some time now. Some humans can survive in vacuum for short periods, others can process methane-based atmospheres, and there are even underwater colonies where people have developed enhanced lung capacity and pressure tolerance. The breaking point came during a lecture about interspecies conflict resolution. This was one of Zethkar's favorite topics because it allowed him to demonstrate the superior rational thinking that had evolved in older galactic civilizations. He was explaining why primitive species were incapable of mediating complex disputes between advanced civilizations. The psychological complexity required for successful conflict resolution, he stated with authority, demands evolutionary development far beyond what any young species could achieve. It requires understanding of multiple cultural frameworks, advanced emotional regulation, and sophisticated communication skills that take millions of years to develop naturally. Jake Morrison, who had been quietly listening for most of the semester, finally spoke up. Professor, with all due respect, humans have been mediating conflicts for thousands of years. It does not always work perfectly, and we have made terrible mistakes, but we have a fairly extensive history of helping different groups find peaceful solutions to their problems. Impossible, Zethkar responded immediately. The cognitive requirements alone would be beyond any species that has not undergone at least 10 million years of social evolution. Jake glanced at his two companions, and Lisa nodded slightly. She reached into her simple gray uniform and pulled out a small device that Zethkar had never seen before. It was clearly advanced technology, but unlike anything in the university's extensive databases. When she activated it, a holographic display appeared above her desk, showing what appeared to be historical records. This is our homeworld, Earth, Lisa said quietly. The display showed a blue and green planet that looked surprisingly similar to several garden worlds in the galactic core. These are records of some of our conflict resolution efforts over the past few thousand years. The hologram shifted to show images that made Zethkar's 4 eyes widen with shock. Massive gatherings of different human populations working together on complex projects. Detailed treaties between groups that appeared to be completely different subspecies. Elaborate organizational structures that coordinated the efforts of billions of individuals across entire continents. This is our United Nations, Lisa continued, showing a building filled with representatives from hundreds of different human cultures. It is not perfect, and it often moves slowly, but it has helped prevent major wars for over 2 centuries. Now, we also have thousands of smaller organizations dedicated to resolving conflicts, providing humanitarian aid, and protecting endangered populations. Danny leaned forward to add his own observations. We have learned that most conflicts come from fear and misunderstanding rather than actual incompatibility. When people are afraid, they make bad decisions. When they understand each other better, they usually find ways to cooperate instead of fighting. We are not claiming to be perfect, Jake added seriously. We have fought terrible wars and made devastating mistakes. But we keep trying to do better. We keep learning from our failures and working to find better solutions. The holographic display continued showing images that challenged everything Zethkar thought he knew about species development. Humans working with completely different subspecies of their own kind. Massive engineering projects that required cooperation between millions of individuals. Scientific research programs that spanned multiple generations and involved unprecedented levels of coordination. The reason we are here, Lisa said as she deactivated the device, is because we have been observing galactic civilization for decades. We have seen the tensions building between different species, the resource conflicts, the territorial disputes. We believe many of these problems could be solved through better communication and understanding. But we needed to understand how other species perceived us first, Jake explained. Your lectures have been incredibly valuable in showing us exactly what we are up against. Half the galaxy thinks we are monsters, the other half thinks we do not exist at all. Zethkar sat in stunned silence as his students began asking excited questions. Everything he had believed about species development, about the requirements for advanced civilization, about the very nature of intelligence itself, was being rewritten before his eyes. The mythical humans were not only real, they were far more advanced than he had ever imagined possible. The news spread through the University of HFY like wildfire through dry grass. Within hours of Lisa Parker's holographic demonstration, every faculty member on campus knew that real humans were attending Professor Zethkar's xenobiology classes. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Some professors abandoned their own lectures to crowd into Zethkar's classroom, desperate to see the mythical beings for themselves. Others refused to believe the reports, insisting it was some elaborate hoax or misunderstanding. Chancellor Wexler called an emergency assembly of the entire academic community. The great auditorium had not been this packed since the discovery of the crystalline Vorthak homeworld 50 years earlier. Faculty members from every department filled the floating seats while graduate students pressed against the walls, all hoping to witness what many were calling the most significant xenobiological event in galactic history. Professor Zethkar found himself in the most humbling position of his entire career. As the primary contact with the humans, he was expected to present his findings to the assembled academics. The irony was not lost on him that he would be introducing the very species he had spent decades dismissing as mythology. His mandibles clicked nervously as he approached the central podium, acutely aware that every eye in the auditorium was focused on him. "Colleagues," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic enhancement system, "3 weeks ago I stood before my xenobiology class and definitively stated that humans were nothing more than galactic folklore. Today I must publicly acknowledge that I was completely wrong." A murmur ran through the crowd as Jake Morrison, Dr. Lisa Parker, and Danny Rodriguez walked onto the stage. They moved with that same confident ease that had impressed Zethkar from the beginning, showing no signs of being intimidated by the hundreds of alien beings staring at them with intense curiosity. "These 3 individuals have turned our understanding of species development upside down," Zethkar continued. "They represent capabilities and achievements that our current scientific models suggested were impossible. But they are here, and they are real, and they have something important to tell us." Jake stepped forward to address the assembly. His calm demeanor and steady voice immediately commanded attention from beings who had spent their lives studying communication and behavior across species lines. "Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you," he said. "We know our presence here is surprising, but we hope you will hear what we have come to share. First, we want you to know that we understand our reputation in this galaxy," Lisa added, her scientific background evident in the way she organized her thoughts. "We have been listening to your discussions about humans for many years. We know that some species view us as dangerous predators while others consider us to be complete fiction. Both perspectives have made it difficult for us to establish open communication." Danny smiled at the assembled academics with genuine warmth. "The truth is, we have been here all along. Not here on HFY specifically, but throughout the galaxy. We have been watching, learning, and quietly helping where we could." This statement caused an immediate stir throughout the auditorium. The implications of what Danny had just sighed were staggering. If humans had been present in galactic civilization for years without being detected, it suggested capabilities far beyond what anyone had imagined. "When you say you have been helping," Chancellor Wexler asked from her position at the head of the academic council, "what exactly do you mean?" Jake exchanged glances with his companions before answering. "We mean that human ships have been providing anonymous assistance throughout the galaxy for decades. Medical supplies delivered to plague-stricken worlds with no explanation of their origin. Technical solutions appearing in the databases of species struggling with engineering problems. Conflict resolution suggestions transmitted to governments on the verge of war. The Andromedan shipping crisis 5 years ago," Lisa continued, when their main trade routes were disrupted by solar flares and thousands of worlds faced food shortages. Anonymous cargo ships appeared throughout the sector, delivering emergency supplies and refusing all payment or identification. "That was us," Danny said simply. "We have been doing things like that for a very long time." Professor Yethmak, the head of the engineering department, leaned forward in his seat. "You are claiming that humans have been operating undetected throughout galactic space for decades. This would require technological capabilities far beyond what we believed possible for any species." "We are not trying to brag about our technology," Jake replied. "We are trying to explain why we remained hidden for so long. We needed to understand galactic civilization before revealing ourselves. We needed to learn your languages, your customs, your fears, and your hopes." Lisa activated her holographic device again, this time displaying star charts that showed human presence throughout the galaxy. Red dots appeared on hundreds of systems, indicating human observation posts, aid stations, and research facilities that had been operating in secret for generations. "We have been studying all of you," she said quietly, "not as subjects in an experiment, but as potential friends and partners. We have watched your species develop, struggle with challenges, celebrate victories, and work toward better futures. We have seen the conflicts brewing between different civilizations, the resource shortages that threaten stability, and the communication failures that lead to unnecessary wars. Our question for you," Danny said, addressing the entire assembly, "is whether you would be willing to work with us, not as leaders or teachers, but as partners in solving the challenges that face all of us." The auditorium fell completely silent as the full impact of the human revelation sank in. These beings were not asking to be worshipped or feared. They were not demanding tribute or territory. They were offering partnership and assistance to species they had been secretly protecting for decades. Professor Zethkar realized that his embarrassment at being wrong about human existence was nothing compared to the shame he felt about his species' assumptions. Here were beings who had possessed the power to conquer or dominate galactic civilization, but had instead chosen to serve as hidden guardians, asking for nothing in return. "Why now?" asked Professor Kaltara from the philosophy department. "Why? Reveal yourselves at this particular moment." Jake's expression grew serious. "Because the challenges facing the galaxy are growing beyond what we can address through anonymous assistance. Climate changes on dozens of worlds, resource conflicts between neighboring species, technological problems that require open collaboration. To solve, we believe it is time for all of us to work together openly. We are not perfect," Lisa emphasized. "We have made terrible mistakes in our own history. We have fought wars, destroyed environments, and caused suffering that we deeply regret. But we have also learned from those mistakes, and we want to share both our failures and our solutions with others who might benefit from our experience." "The galaxy is facing a choice," Danny concluded. "We can continue operating as separate civilizations, competing for resources and struggling with problems alone, or we can recognize that we are all part of the same cosmic community, sharing knowledge and working together to build something better than any of us could achieve individually." As the humans finished speaking, Zethkar looked around the auditorium at hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all processing the implications of what they had just learned. The mythical guardians were real, and they were offering to step out of the shadows to help build a better future for everyone. 6 months after the day that changed everything, Professor Zethkar stood before the largest lecture hall at the University of Kepler-Prime, preparing to teach his most popular class. The irony of the situation still amazed him every morning. When he looked in the mirror, the professor, who had once dismissed humans as galactic mythology, had become the galaxy's leading expert on human studies. And his course had a waiting list that stretched for 3 semesters. The lecture hall buzzed with excitement as students from over 30 different species filled every available seat. Crystalline Vorthax students hummed in harmony with insectoid klaxons, while furry Altarians shared notes with scaled centaurians. In the front row, Yixla sat with her research pad ready, her scales glowing with the blue-green pattern that indicated intense academic enthusiasm among her people. "Welcome to Human Studies," Zethkar began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's enhancement system. "Today we will examine the psychological factors that allow humans to maintain hope in seemingly impossible situations, a trait that appears to be unique among known galactic species." He activated his holographic display, which now featured detailed information about human psychology, sociology, and culture instead of the mythological creature presentations he had used just months earlier. The transformation of his teaching materials represented the complete revolution that had occurred in his understanding of the universe. "As we have learned through direct observation and interaction," he continued, "humans possess an unusual ability to find potential solutions even when facing overwhelming odds. This characteristic has allowed them to survive multiple extinction events, develop advanced technology despite resource limitations, and maintain social cooperation across vast populations with significant cultural differences." A young draconian student raised one of her forearms. "Professor, how do humans maintain psychological stability when confronted with problems that have no apparent solutions?" "An excellent question," Zethkar replied, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Human psychology appears to include what they call hope as a fundamental component of their mental architecture. Unlike most species, which experience despair when logical analysis suggests defeat, humans seem capable of continuing to search for alternatives even when the probability of success approaches zero." He displayed a holographic chart showing human achievements throughout their history. "Consider their space program development. When humans first began attempting to leave their home planet, the technological challenges appeared insurmountable. The energy requirements for escaping planetary gravity, the life support needs for surviving in vacuum, the navigation complexities for interplanetary travel, all suggested that spaceflight was impossible for a species at their development level. Yet, they succeeded," observed a Claxon student with obvious admiration. "Not only succeeded, but developed interstellar capabilities within a remarkably short time frame." "Precisely," Zethkar agreed. "And when we examine their methodology, we find that humans approach seemingly impossible problems by breaking them into smaller, manageable components. They accept failure as a learning opportunity rather than as proof that success is impossible. Most importantly, they maintain what they call optimism, the belief that solutions exist even when current knowledge cannot identify them." The door at the back of the lecture hall opened, and Jake Morrison walked in with his usual quiet confidence. He had become a regular visitor to Zethkar's classes, sometimes observing silently and occasionally contributing insights that helped illuminate particularly complex aspects of human behavior. "Mr. Morrison," Zethkar acknowledged warmly, "perhaps you could help us understand the human concept of perseverance in the face of overwhelming challenges." Jake smiled as he took a seat near the back. "Professor, I think you understand it better than most humans do. You have spent months studying something that you once believed was impossible, and you have become one of the galaxy's leading experts on our species. That kind of intellectual courage and adaptability is exactly what perseverance means to us." The comment brought a wave of appreciation sounds from the assembled students. Zethkar felt his exoskeleton warm with what might have been embarrassment or pride. The transformation from skeptical professor to human advocate had indeed required the same kind of hope and determination that he was teaching his students to recognize in human psychology. "Dr. Parker and Engineer Rodriguez have also become permanent faculty members here," Zethkar announced. "Their courses on human technology and interspecies diplomacy are providing our students with unprecedented insights into cooperative problem-solving methodologies." Through the tall windows of the lecture hall, Zethkar could see the transformed campus outside. Human ships now docked regularly alongside vessels from dozens of other worlds. The university had become a focal point for the new galactic cooperation that was emerging as more species learned about humanity's secret assistance programs. "Professor," asked a Vortex student, her crystalline structure chiming with curiosity, How has human involvement changed the trajectory of galactic civilization? That is perhaps the most important question we can ask, Zethkar replied thoughtfully. In the 6 months since humans revealed their presence, we have seen unprecedented levels of cooperation between species that had previously been suspicious or hostile toward each other. The key appears to be their approach to conflict resolution. He displayed images from recent diplomatic successes throughout the galaxy. Trade disputes that had threatened to escalate into wars were being resolved through mediation, techniques that humans had developed over millennia. Environmental problems that had seemed unsolvable were being addressed through technological solutions that combined human innovation with the specialized knowledge of other species. Humans seemed to understand something that many of us had forgotten. Zethkar continued. Every species has unique strengths and perspectives that can contribute to solving complex problems. Rather than competing for dominance, they encourage collaboration that allows each civilization to contribute its best capabilities to shared challenges. Yixla raised her hand with obvious excitement. Professor, I have been accepted into the new joint research program with human scientists. We will be studying methods for terraforming damaged worlds using techniques that combine human environmental restoration knowledge with Centaurian biological engineering. Excellent, Zethkar responded with genuine pleasure. That is exactly the kind of collaborative research that represents our future. Humans have shown us that the galaxy's greatest challenges are also our greatest opportunities to work together. Jake Morrison stood up from his seat in the back. If I may add something, Professor? We have learned as much from all of you as you have learned from us. Every species we have encountered has taught us new ways of thinking about old problems. The real discovery here is not that humans exist, but that all of us together can achieve things that none of us could accomplish alone. As the class period ended and students began filing out, chattering excitedly about their upcoming research projects and collaborative assignments, Zethkar remained at his podium for a few extra moments. Through his office window he could see construction crews from multiple species working together to build new research facilities that would house joint scientific programs. The small photograph on his desk caught his attention as it did every day. It was a gift from his human colleagues showing Earth from space, a blue and white sphere that looked so peaceful and ordinary that it was hard to believe it had produced the species that was quietly transforming galactic civilization. A young student approached his podium as the lecture hall emptied. Professor Zethkar, how did we miss an entire species for so long? It was the same question that haunted him every day, and he had developed an answer that satisfied both his scientific training and his newfound understanding of the universe's complexity. Perhaps, young one, they were not hiding from us. Perhaps. We were not ready to see them. The universe has a way of revealing its most important secrets only when we are prepared to handle the responsibility that comes with such knowledge. As the student left with a thoughtful expression, Zethkar gathered his materials and prepared for his next class. Outside his window, ships from 100 worlds were arriving and departing, carrying students, researchers, and diplomats who were building the foundation for a new kind of galactic community. The mythical humans had become the bridge to a future that none of them had imagined possible, and the real work of building tomorrow was just beginning.